Hello and welcome to the wide world of InfoSync World Reviews, and today's review is the Nikon P500. This follows up last year's P100, which had a 26x optical zoom, but what Nikon has done this year for 2011 is boosted that by 10. We have a 36x optical zoom on the Nikon Coolpix P500 that edges out the Canon PowerShot SX30IS by 1x. Take that. Also, the Coolpix P500 has a few other upgrades. Most of them are design oriented. We now have a secondary zoom toggle on the side that can adjust zoom, manual focus, and snapback zoom, which is like a one-touch bring it back or telephoto it. The LCD has been injected with more pixels. We now have 921,000 dot display versus last year's 460,000 display. And we've got a convenient drive button here that lets us select all our frames per second, our multi-shot 16, and anything that has to do with multiple frame, time intervals, whatever. But the remainder of the P500's design stays the same. We have this nice fold-out LCD here. It doesn't swivel like Canon's, but at least it folds out. We have an electronic viewfinder that really saved us in the glare because this LCD glares like none other. Pop-up flash, we have a stereo mic on top, HDMI, and we like the camera's secondary control dial in the back, and we have the 4-way directional pad. We also have a quick high-speed or HD video button here. Nikon also gave us a little more grip with this nice knurled rubber grip along the right side, and for the most part this camera is compact compared to the SX30IS. It's more in line with the Panasonic Lumix DMC FZ40. Now regarding the zoom on this camera, this is very important. When you have it at full telephoto 36 and you're shooting videos, despite the efforts of the electronic image stabilization, there's really not much that can be done. It's going to be exceedingly jittery. Compared to Canon's, it just can't hack it. Canon's is the best by far. In still image though, the 5-way VR system works very well. Our targets are locked down and this camera is great. But when it comes to shooting videos, look at our image samples, our video samples, and you'll see it's just a jitter fest 2011. Also, this camera's focusing system makes a peculiar grumbling sound, and you'll notice that in some of our video samples as well. And that's something that we just have to get used to with this camera, but it's bad enough that, you know, we can slightly hear the zoom motor on this camera, but to hear this light grumbling and hubbub about in the background is just kind of puts a damper on our shooting experience. Also, Nikon really needs to update the menus on this camera. It's like we're stuck in an Apple IIc from 1982. The menus are very quick, and that's great. It has good firmware, but they're just antiquated. Comparing Canon's menu system to Nikon's is like comparing a BMW to a Geo Metro. For overall manual controls and shooting features, this camera has a shutter speed that can go down to 8 seconds, ISO range that reaches 3200. We have manual and preset white balance modes, and we also have an aperture of 3.4 to 8.0. But one great thing about this camera is it takes fantastic macro pictures. Also, it has a slew of high-speed shooting options. We have 60 frames per second at 2 megapixels. We have 120 frames per second at 1 megapixel. There's also a best shot selector. There's time interval. We could do up to 10 minutes to 30 seconds. Another feature we really liked on the P500 was active D-lighting, and you'll see that in our image samples in our review on our website. Active D-lighting works wonders for contrasts. However, the P500 is devoid of the fun, artistic type filters you'll find on the Canon PowerShot SX30IS and Panasonic FZ40. This is more of a straightforward shooter with a decent set of manual controls that's good for a beginner or a student looking to broaden their horizons, or someone who's a stalker and just needs a really gigantic zoom. Now, aside from the few shooting quirks we experienced with the Nikon P500, image quality was actually pretty impressive. When we compared it to last year's, it had a slight edge. This year, Nikon went with the 12.1 megapixel back illuminated CMOS sensor, and it has Nikon's new EXPEED 2 processing. Bright light is great. especially macro shots, close-ups. This camera handles it excellent. The focus just locks right in like a snake. However, in defocus portions, we notice a good amount of smearing. This camera will exhibit entry-level type image aberrations like purple fringing. We'll also see blown highlights unless we jump on the manual mode and really dial that shutter speed up a bit. And in low light, this camera's noise management was really not that bad, especially when we compared it to the SX30. We actually kind of preferred the P500 over the Canon. One thing you do have to watch though in low light still shooting is white balance. You're really going to have to adjust the white balance because this camera goes haywire with the yellow and reddish kind of tint. Now the P500 is also capable of 1080p at 30 frames per second, and it also shoots high speed, 120 frames per second at VGA, and QVGA is 240 frames per second. And we could also shoot 720p at 60 frames per second with this camera. And just like last year, we are very impressed with the quality of the P500's video, especially in bright light. Close-up subjects, we actually preferred it over still images in certain situations. Low light is really lacking though as far as sensitivity goes. You really need to be in a well-lit environment in order for this camera to work. Sound recording is decent, it's not the best, but we do get stereo. So that sums it up. Here's our InfoSync diagnosis with the Nikon Coolpix P500 36x optical zoom, super zoom camera. Is this better than last year's P100? We think it is. Image quality has a slight edge. We get a larger zoom. We have a more robust design on this camera. However, as we stated throughout the review, we need much better image stabilization, particularly in video mode. We'd like some more fun filters and effects, just like Canon. And we really need updated menus on this thing, without a doubt. Other than that, if you're stuck, please check out our reviews of the Canon PowerShot SX30IS and Panasonic Lumix DMC FZ40 before you settle on a Nikon Coolpix P500. They're all within the same price range, so it's really up to you. So go to our site, infosyncworld.com, read the whole Nikon Coolpix P500 review. Until next time, I'm Mike Prum.